Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Manhat Thomas. I'm thrilled to be your host for the inaugural episode of the Africa FinTech Pulse, brought to you by the Africa FinTech Summit. For the past 5 years, I've had the incredible privilege of producing the Africa FinTech Summit through Flawless Events, a journey that has taken me across Africa, the United States, with the amazing Africa FinTech core team. I'm also excited to share that I'm the co-founder of Chronos Educational platform, an AI powered edtech platform that is just starting to spread its wings. Today, we're here for a treat. I'll be chatting with Zekarias Amsalu, the co founder of the Africa FinTech Summit and the managing director of IBEX Frontier, about the exciting new developments at Africa FinTech Summit and getting his insights on what's in store for the fintech landscape in 2025. As we step further into this new year, there's so much to explore and discover in the world of the African fintech. Let's dive in. All right, we are live. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our new series of the Africa FinTech Pulse podcast series brought to you by the Africa FinTech Summit. I have the co-founder Zekarias Amsalu here with me to not just introduce himself, but also introduce what the Africa FinTech Pulse is meant to do, what its purpose is. Hi, Zekarias, how are you?
Hey, Manhat, glad to be here. Thank you very
I'm
much.
excited for being on this podcast with you and being being part of the first episode of this new series. So before we get too deep into the conversation, for new listeners and even people that are tuning back into our series, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about who you are, and then tell us a little bit about what Africa FinTech Pulse is supposed to be and what it's supposed to do.
Thank you very much. Glad to be the inaugural guest for this podcast, and glad that you're hosting. So, my name is Zekarias. I'm the co-founder of the Africa FinTech Summit, the largest biannual summit that takes place both in the U.S. and also in the continent twice a year. We started in 2018. We have our summit twice a year, purposefully. We have this summit in DC every April, when the World Bank and IMF Spring meeting brings the entire African fintech and financial industry to the city, including bank governors, banks, CEOs, Ministry of Finance, regulators, policymakers. So it will be easier to talk about the fintech regulation, cross-border payment, how the global experiences of fintech innovation can be shared, and also the African success story can be amplified. So that was chosen deliberately. And every November we go to one African city. So far we've gone to Lagos, Addis, Cairo, Cape Town, Lusaka, and last year we went to Nairobi. Our summit is a biannual summit. In addition to our summit, we have a weekly newsletter with 75,000 plus readers. And we used to have a podcast called the Africa FinTech Rising, and that started in 2018. And last year, we also started another series called As the Investor. So one aspect of our FinTech Summit and event is a pitch competition. So we've seen quite a number of African FinTech founders, early stage startups, needed coaching and also investment readiness. So we started that as the Investor Series. But the Africa FinTech Rising podcast was actually in the top 10 business and technology sector podcast in many regions across MENA, across Europe, and also even Asia. Leland, my co-founding partner, used to host it. Obviously, at the time, as the title indicates, it's rising. The Africa FinTech is rising. We were actually showing the potential of the Africa FinTech. 7 years later, we're not talking about the Africa FinTech rising. The Africa FinTech opportunity is proven as a success. And actually, right now, the African FinTech startups and the scale up are going globally. That's why the theme of this series, From Africa to the World. So we don't need to preach, so to speak, the Africa FinTech rising. Rather, we would like to give the global audience, especially the investors who are looking for a high return for their capital deployment, that the Africa FinTech ecosystem will provide a unique opportunity. So that is why we change this. We combine the two podcast, the Africa FinTech Rising, and also the Ask Investor series. And we created a new podcast, the Africa FinTech Pulse. So from Rising to Pulse. So we just providing the inside story of what is going on within the ecosystem, where are the opportunities. We're going to spotlight the stakeholders, the change makers of the Africa FinTech Summit, the Africa FinTech ecosystem. So hence we have the first episode of this Africa FinTech Pulse
Yeah,
series.
I like it. So the heartbeat of Africa, essentially. I love that word.
Absolutely, absolutely. The
Yeah,
heartbeat.
that's
Yeah.
that's amazing. I know you went deep into the summit and what Africa FinTech Investor Series was, and what Africa FinTech Summit is. Um, Maybe share a little bit about who you are and what you hope to see through these endeavors.
Good. So my background is in finance. I studied in accounting, originally from Ethiopia. I lived in London for almost 12 years, and then right now I'm based here in near Washington D.C. in Virginia. So I had this experience of working and living in three continents, and throughout my experience, we've seen the opportunity of the African fintech and tech ecosystem. So my purpose and my goal through this podcast and also the Africa FinTech Summit and then our newsletter and our publication is providing accurate and actionable data about the Africa FinTech and investment ecosystem, and also bringing international investors and partners to the continent and providing them with actionable data that helps them to deploy their capital. And for the Africa FinTech founders and the startups, giving them the platform that will create visibility, access, and opportunity, both in their scaling and also in their operation going global to the global fintech ecosystem.
Wow, that is such a huge purpose, and I commend you for having such a large purpose. I've been involved with the Africa FinTech Summit, and I've seen how you have
You've been a crucial part of
yeah,
it, yes.
and I've seen how you know you have evened out the playing field as much as you can, and allowed or enabled. You've been an enabler for Africa FinTech startups to compete in the global marketplace and compete with global investors in mind. So any
Yeah,
highlights for, or not highlights, but any predictions for 2025? I know we only finished January, and there's some there's already some money that's being raised in January, so it looks like we're back. Fintech is back. What are your expectations?
absolutely. Absolutely. So we issued our 2025 prediction the first week of January. And one of the things we said is that big ticket fundraise are back. And we said that, given our knowledge of the ecosystem and the startups potential and what's coming up. And I was very, very much pleasantly surprised. The first 2 weeks of January, we already have a large ticket fundraisers. So we closed January with $216 million fundraise. It's a huge number. So it's almost quarter a million in 1 month. And we had a number of deals. So from a start, you can tell that, yes, fintech is back, big ticket fundraisers are back, and African fintechs are going global. Then we also say that this is going to be a year of unpredictability, uncertainty, and increasing protectionism. So, despite Africa under the Continental Free Trade Agreement is acting as one market, globally we'll see a lot of increased protectionism, uncertainty, and unpredictability. And that impacts the global ecosystem both at macro and micro level. So this will impact fintechs, especially operating in cross-border trade, e-commerce, and international trade. As this protectionism increase with a lot of sanctions and trade wars, as it were, increasing, fintechs will need to really be proactive in planning to serve their customers operating in the global space. It could be currency, it could be countries trading with, it could be a lot of compliance requirement. So that will be one big theme that we're going to see this year as economies and markets navigate through this unpredictability. Then fintechs need to also adapt so that they can serve their customers. And this is going to be also a year of stable coins. You're going to hear a lot of stable coins. That is a digital asset, a digital currency backed by a real life stable currency in various instruments, mainly in treasuries and actual dollars and currencies. What you see globally will be different in Africa. Globally, what we're hearing that enterprises and fintechs are using stable coins, and now we're talking about mass adoption. In Africa, it is a different case. Africa has already been using stable coin in remittance, in cross-border trade, and international transactions. The fintechs, even those who don't openly say they're using stable coin, they are using those provider and exchange who provide stable coins to enable their international trade. What is taking place in Africa, the mass adoption is already there. It's been already been proved over the years. In 2025, we expect actually enterprise-wide usage. A supplier, an importer, an exporter stuck in opening a letter of credit because of shortage of forex in a particular bank now can easily use a regulated and licensed exchange, crypto exchange in the country to buy a stable coin in their local currency and pay their suppliers globally. So we're going to see a lot of stablecoin based solutions. Stablecoin has already reduced the cost of international transfer from uh, you know 14% down to almost zero by 75%. The cost of remittance transaction to emerging markets has already gone down by 17%. And we're going to see that's going to be a huge theme for the year. We're going to see a surge of mergers and acquisition. African startups, scale ups. We've seen that, Flutterwave, ManyPoint, On Africa have already been acquiring a lot of startups in their vertical and horizontal operation. We're going to see a number of that as well. We've seen that in 2024, a lot of startups has failed because of liquidity and also their market fit and loss of funding. We see this year there will be a consolidation and shift towards profitability. So startups will be focusing not only conserving cash, but they have to prove that they have a clear path to profitability. Those who are not profitable will be consolidated, acquired by competitor or potential companies that uses their operation is a horizontal or vertical operation. Large ticket fundraising is back and will continue, and African startups will continue to go global. That is why our theme for this year is from Africa to the world, and we're going to amplify those success stories of African startups going global in the months to come. And Africa FinTech is unique because mobile money has a huge place. Africa has birthed mobile money and gifted the world. And we see in number of markets, the largest transaction is still taking place in mobile money. So we're going to see a number of embedded fintech solutions based on mobile money that is unique in Africa. Not card transaction, but mobile money. So you'll see a lot of fintech revolution, fintech eruption, fintech solutions based on mobile money. So embedded fintech based on mobile money. And the Continental Free Trade Agreement has also opened transaction between member countries with no restriction, so to speak. So we'll see a lot of cross-border transactions. So fintechs in trade tech, e-commerce, and currency settlement between the various borders within Africa will have a large potential, and we're going to see a number of transactions. Regulation is one area we will see to follow innovation, as we've seen mobile money and M-Pesa in Kenya. Innovation, in particular in stablecoin and crypto, has proven its use benefit to the cross-border trade and remittance in Africa, and we expect the regulators actually giving recognition and support to those innovations. We also have seen that there is a need for a larger number of data center and infrastructure in Africa. The Continental Free Trade Agreement and also the Digital Trade Protocol will facilitate that. But we also see that Africa's leap in digital center infrastructure and also AI has a new path through Bitcoin mining. Bitcoin mining in 2024, for example, Africa has a 3.4 hash rate of the global Bitcoin mining because of its abundant and affordable power, green power, hydropower, and solar, wind power. So those Bitcoin mining companies are actually using the same infrastructure of data center and AI infrastructure. So we see those Bitcoin mining investments will eventually turn into AI and data center investment, or at least they justify the cost of power production and infrastructure investment that will eventually lead to AI growth. We also see that a lot of African fintechs realizing that they can start issuing cards, they can start banking operations. So we're going to see a number of African fintechs acquiring other banks or acquiring banking license in microfinance acquisition. That will be another theme. Globally, this year we expect a rise of M&A and IPO transaction. So this global tide of the global IPO tide we expect will impact the African fintech. So a number of African fintech scale-ups are expecting to go IPO or public in 2017, 2018. We expect that global tide of IPO and M&A transaction either shortens or accelerates the pace of the African fintechs going global. We also predicted that 2025 we're going to bring few new African unicorns. By unicorn, we mean $1 billion USD valuation, priced valuation. So we have On Afrique, Mcopa, Kuda, Yellow Card, and Yoko as six startups that we predict that will achieve unicorns in 2025. But overall, we see 2025 a year where Africa will go back to its pre-VC freeze fundraise. Large ticket fundraise will be coming back. Fintech is back. Stablecoin will be the theme. African startups will continue to go global. And we see a lot of inter-African trade and fintech innovation powered by the Continental Free Trade Agreement and the Digital Trade Protocol implementation.
Wow, that's quite a prediction. So I think we're going to have to come back every quarter with you, Zach, and check in and just see where we are on those predictions. But
We do.
yeah, wow. It looks like 2025 is going to be super jam packed, especially considering that we already raised 260 million. Yeah,
2016.
that's crazy. Um, so, are there any specific features you're looking for 2025 as far as development and innovation with these startups?
Yes. So one is, as I mentioned, mobile money is still a very African innovation. Last mile fintech and financial service delivery is powered by mobile money. So any innovation based on the layer of mobile money will have a large impact and a huge impact in Africa. I see a lot of those coming to play. And We're also talking about AI. So what I see about the AI impact in Africa is what has mobile money has done to the financial services. So instead of building brick and mortar banks and financial service delivery to every village in Africa, Africa is a digital native continent. Everyone has mobile money, so a mobile phone. So financial services were managed to be mass deployed using mobile money technology. So what mobile money has done to financial industry is going to be similar what AI is going to do to other sectors, whether it is education, public health, any other sector that can be delivered through AI will have a big impact. So mobile money to financial services, AI will help other sectors to for mass deployment in Africa. We also expect a discussion of a large number of global fintechs, as we've seen it already this year, even in January. Global fintechs will see that actually the next billion users, the next billion consumers, the next billion spenders will come from emerging markets, including Africa. Africa is a continent of 1.4 billion, predominantly younger generation. So we expect a lot of long-term investors and technology investors will look into Africa, and African tech startups will be their path to this opportunity. So we're going to see a number of acquisitions, a number of investment by global tech and fintech giants into African startups, and that will be the theme for the year.
Wow, yeah, I definitely do see, especially here in the US, you see a huge surge of AI development and the push towards automation and including AI and everything. So I'm very curious to see how it will change the landscape of what we see in Africa right now. It's definitely
Yeah,
an enabler. I know it has enabled me to be super productive throughout my day. So
yeah,
yeah,
all of
and
us, yeah, all of
yeah,
us, yeah.
I'm very excited to see what the future holds as far as AI in Africa goes. So you know, as we're wrapping up, just I have a couple more questions for you, in regarding to like why should investors, especially early stage investors, look for deals in Africa? Like, I know you spoke a little bit about how the problems that we're solving in Africa, but not particularly the problems itself, but the way startups and the way
Mm,
innovation is headed in Africa. It's to solve a problem that exists, and when it comes to adoption,
yeah,
it doesn't seem like Africa has a problem with adoption because we have the numbers and we're
yeah,
basically creating tech and we're creating solutions
yeah,
for people that we know need it. So the proof of concept is already there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so what advice do you have, or what message do you have for early stage investors?
yeah. So this is very interesting because there is a real perceived risk of investing in tech and in emerging markets, and Africa is crossing both sectors. Emerging markets, there is risk investing in a particular country in the continent itself, and tech itself is a risky investment. But what Africa has shown is that yes, there is risk in any investment, but investing the African fintech ecosystem is rewarding. That is what we've been amplifying over the last 5 years. Now we don't need to amplify; it's well proven. We can only mention few use cases and examples. And if for any early stage startup who was looking into Africa and looking at the stage of the startup, early stage, is it worth investing, deploying my capital? Money is they're accountable to their LPs investment wise. But let me give you two examples alone. One is a Paystack story, and another is a Money Point story. Look at Paystack. So they had angel investors, early stage startup, African VCs who invested in Paystack. Down the line, Paystack was acquired by Stripe. Most of those early startups, early investors, they made a huge return that now they are deploying that return into many other startups. We talk about the PayPal farm mafia. So now we're talking about the Paystack mafia. Most of those senior founders, senior executives, and who could make good money at that exit are investing on their own. So that is one good success story. If you speak to their investors, they will tell you the number of multipliers they got at the exit of Paystack. A recent example just revealed this month's money point. So we have Oil Capital that invested 150 is an African VC. They invested $150,000 just 5 years ago when Money Point was at its early stage. And it's not even IPO. It's just a particular investment from Visa. And as Money Point became a unicorn, they had an opportunity to exit. So in less than 5 years, they've already turned $150,000 to $8 million. That's almost unheard of in other markets, with exception of few selective success stories. So they've raised 4 million, and they returned that 4 million fund one just with one exit, and they still have 4 million left to invest in other startups. So take the example of these particular investors who turned 150,000 to 8 million in less than 5 years. And early stage investors in Paystack, they made a huge amount of money when Paystack was acquired by Stripe. Those are good examples of how the next big return, the next impactful return comes from the Africa FinTech ecosystem.
Well, that's incredible. Um, one challenge and one question I would throw out to you is right now with advanced technology, innovation, AI, automation, Bitcoin, stablecoin. With I feel like we're at a point where just so much is happening and so much potential is out there, right? So what that does
Yeah.
is that it bears the fruit of startups and innovators, and it's going to be a huge resurgence in there. So with the African startups right now, are they competing with other startups globally? Right? They are, but I know they're solving an African problem right now, and they can be solving a bigger problem later on
Yeah.
when they do scale. But
Yeah.
do you think that competition is going to make it a little bit difficult for these startups?
It's a good competition because at early stage, as we've said, African fintechs, times have changed, right? Startups or even founders are no longer territorial. No, my market is in Nigeria. I just focus in Nigeria, or I focus in Uganda or Ethiopia. From a start, they have this global vision because the world is connected. Africa is already, automatically a one market under the Continental Free Trade Agreement. But the global markets, the global fintech startups also see Africa as opportunity. So as African startups are going global to LATAM, last year we had about 6 Latin America fintechs already moving to Africa. So it's like both ways. So yes, there is a challenge from a well-funded global startups coming to Africa. But the African startups and founders have this unique opportunity of knowing the problem, living the problems they are solving, and producing a technology that is well adapted to Africa. Even the technology stack they deploy is very unique. Some of the technology you have in other developed markets, you can bring it to Africa, but it's difficult to deploy or scale because the assumed infrastructure and tech stack doesn't exist in Africa. Whereas the African startups have a solution, but also the technology stack and the infrastructure they know exist in Africa, and they have already built their technology stack on existing infrastructure. Hence, it makes it easier for them to scale up and compete with global markets. So there's no the divide between African and global startups is now blurred as the world is becoming one. And the African startups already know that. From day one, they are operating as a global company. So before even maybe they go next door from Nigeria to Ghana or from Kenya to Uganda, if they see an opportunity in Indonesia, they will go there because they know that the world is one when it comes to technology.
Okay. So what's the plan for this year as far as Africa FinTech Summit goes? I know we have a conference coming up in DC and another one in November or later in the year.
Yeah, so we are coming back to DC as we've been doing for the last 7 years. In April 24 this year, we'll be having our 13th Africa FinTech Summit here at Halcyon in Washington, DC. So we'll be talking about stablecoin, remittance, cross-border payment, and we're so excited also to talk about the compliance, regulation, and fraud prevention. We'll be having our new venture pitch competition. So we're excited for that. But before that, we are also heading to the Ghana FinTech Award in March 1 in Accra. And we'll be announcing what is our plan for the November event. So look forward to that. So April, we have our FinTech Summit taking place here in DC. And also our November event will be in Accra, Ghana, but we'll announce it and the details at the Ghana FinTech Award on March 1st. Very much excited about it. This year, our summit will be our largest yet with content and also with the audience will be welcoming. More information will come through. We will going to have this Africa FinTech Pulse podcast regularly. So we're going to bring a number of African FinTech executives and investors. Look out to listen to this podcast throughout our weekly newsletter. Our weekly newsletter will bring insights on a weekly basis. Our websites have a community hub where we have a huge volume of 7 years of first-hand videos, firesides, keynotes, content, insights we have. So we will be adding a lot of content through our podcasts, summits, weekly newsletter, and then our digital footprint. So much to look out for the year.
It sounds like 2025 is going to be our year.
We hope so, and we'll work to make it happen along with amplifying the success story of the African fintech ecosystem, but also bringing investors to the ecosystem through our pitch competitions, through our summit, and with our report and insights.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zach, for your time, and thank you for the introduction. I'm looking so much forward to both Africa FinTech Pulse and the Africa Summit coming up, and your predictions coming to light. I will be checking with you on those. I'll have a tracker just with a bar and say, okay, we're almost here, but we're not there yet. This one we've closed, so we'll do a checklist, and it would be really cool to see that come to life throughout the year. So.
Thank you very much, Manhat, for hosting the very first Africa FinTech Pulse podcast we have. And as we continue to, showcase the heartbeat of the Africa FinTech ecosystem, this is a very new edition. And thanks for hosting me. And looking forward to executing the Africa FinTech Summit we have for the next two editions here in DC and also in Accra. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach. I'm looking forward to that as well.